Welcome back to Jackass Politics. It's January 19th, 2025. Mark it down, folks, because TikTok is officially banned. Or maybe not. We'll get into the chaos in a bit. But first, let's talk about the absolute mess in D.C.
Yeah, Trump's cabinet confirmation hearings, it's like a bad episode of Shark Tank, except the ideas are terrible and everyone's getting a deal anyway.
Peach Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, the guy's biggest strategic decision is probably choosing between gin and whiskey at the bar.
And Pam Bondi for Attorney General, an election denier and a registered foreign agent. It's like putting a pyromaniac in charge of the fire department.
But this is why people don't trust politicians. These picks are so bad, it's almost impressive. Anyway, let's move on before I throw my coffee across the room. All right. So let's talk TikTok. It's officially banned, or maybe not, because Ed Markey filed a bill to extend the deadline by 270 days. Trump says he might sign an official executive order to push it out 90 days. And Biden's response has basically been, not my problem, it's a mess.
Classic government move. Drop a bomb and then scramble to figure out what to do next. Meanwhile, TikTok's cooler than ever and kids are downloading the Chinese version Red Note just to rebel.
Exactly. Instead of banning TikTok, they should have outshined it. Make a better app, pay creators more, and actually win people over. But not, it's just the wave the national security flag and call it a day.
This is where old school CIA would have dropped Freedom Talk, complete with catchy dances and better payouts. Instead, we get Because We Said So. Good job, team.
What brings us to today's guest, we have Tahra Jirari. Tahra is the Director of Economic Analysis at the Chamber of Progress. She's a tech and policy expert, and she's here to break down the TikTok mess, the California fires, and what Democrats need to bounce back after 2024. Tahra, welcome to Jackass Politics.
Thank you for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Perfect. All right. So, Adam, you want to kick off the TikTok discussion?
But all right, I'll take it. So, Tahra, what do you make of the current situation with TikTok? Do you think banning it or delaying the ban is the right move? And actually, as much as we try to get our information correct, just this morning now, TikTok is back up. So what do you got? What's your take on all this?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even consider it back up. I was told if you open the app now, you can only look at your own account and your previous drafts, but you can't look at the For You page. So it's all very confusing. And last night, it didn't even wait for midnight to have the ban happen. You first got a notification a couple hours before saying like, hey, just a heads up, soon we might be going down. And then they made the very strange decision to shut it down earlier on their own time and note that we are working with President Trump to bring it back on. And I just thought, reading that on my phone, I was like, I wish this was fake. I wish this was not real. But it sadly was. I am actually, when this first was coming about years ago, I was quite impartial because as a resident Gen Z, I do use TikTok myself. And back in grad school, I remember writing a paper regarding this exact situation. And I was quite impartial going into this paper because I like using the app. And I came back with the conclusion with like, wow, okay, no, there are some major national security concerns in here. I don't think we should be using this app. And people have to understand, it's not just the government banning TikTok. They fully had the ability to divest and sell. And the way the law reads, if I am correct, it's that if there was any motion to begin any acquisitions and selling, they would have been granted an extension, but they just refused to do so and are just like holding down, waiting for Trump to come in, hoping to think that an executive order could fix something, which half the time is just like a really fancy press release. Like you can't just send out an executive order and it goes above the law.
Right. I don't know if that's a constitutional thing. Ian and I kind of talked about, while Trump being the executive does have the ability to enforce rules, him just ignoring it with an executive order, I don't know if that's the precedent that we won't set for an instance where national security is involved, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And they've kind of made the law president proof. There's a reason why it was 119, and the fact that there was no instances made means like it kind of is set in stone.
Right.
I would be very shocked, and I would gladly eat my words if there was some change this week where Trump magically saves things, because I just don't see that to be the case at all.
Yeah, that's interesting. So kind of leaning on that, how do you think this decision is landing with younger voters, especially given their skeptical views? And like, so we've seen the TikTok ban. What's happening with it right now is you've got people's view is that the Biden administration is kind of the culprit behind this. You know, whether that's actually the case or not, that's the view of a lot of people. And then on the other side, they think, okay, well, Trump's going to be the one to save it. How do you think that that's affecting younger voters?
Not well for the Dems. I think we had a major failure here, and it's kind of the ongoing issue that I have seen with the Biden admin in the final years and months of this presidency. You can't just make a decision like this and then refuse to expand on the reasonings behind it, because it's quite infantilizing. You are looking at your voters as if they're inept to understand, like, the various reasons as to why we actually felt the need to ban this app. You're not diving into it at all. And like AOC actually came out with a video, I think it was yesterday or recently, where she was just, holding up her phone, talking about exactly why she thought, even though I don't agree with her stance on it, I thought it was a very great communication strategy where you were talking to your voters like they are a person and not talking down to them. So it's why a lot of the videos you're seeing here is like, the US government hates us. This was the one thing that made us happy since COVID. Like, Trump, come save us. And it's like, Trump at least gets on Truth Social and like talks directly about these things. Biden has been down on this for so long. So I think we need more elected Democrats going on video, going on the record and saying why this had to happen and why it was bipartisan and going into the Supreme Court ruling. The opinion itself is quite narrow, and it understands never infringing on the freedom of speech and only applies it towards TikTok. But that's not a narrative people are understanding. It's something we might understand because we are an outlier and we just like genuinely like to read the news and care about these things.
Right, exactly.
You can't blame the average person for not understanding like the differences and like the nuances that go into this.
Yeah, I mean, some people's first experience to the TikTok ban was when they logged on to TikTok this morning and realized that it was down. And like, we need to do a good job of like messaging and getting to those people and telling them why this has happened. And even still, it's not going to look great for Dems, but that we still have to try. Exactly. I fully agree.
So if you were in charge, how would you have handled this differently? Could we have avoided the quote unquote forbidden fruit effect?
I'm so glad I'm not in charge. I would hate to be the one to make this decision and tell people this. Zoomers scare me. But I would just do exactly what I just touched upon and just make it extremely clear as to why this had to happen. And I would remove the language that TikTok has been using where they are just fully being banned by the US government as if they weren't given a fighting chance to ever move forth on that. Like, that's kind of how propaganda fuels on that app in the first place. Like, the fact that they have the ability to just send out that message to millions of Americans proves it. So I would just make sure that we are extremely clear for the reasons as to why this app should not be existing, and the fact that we gave them several options to move forward.
So
go ahead, Adam.
Let me jump in here real quick. Sorry. So ASC also had a video where she had talked about why she did vote against the ban. And what I thought that she proposed was actually a pretty good idea in itself, in that TikTok is not the only company that is affecting our data, right? And like manipulating our data. I mean, Facebook, Twitter, all of them do it. So why don't we have a right to privacy law and make it where we're making it where our data is protected and that these companies can't mess along with it. And I think that in retrospect, that sounds like a really great idea. I'm not sure how you put it into, law, but something like that would have been far more effective, and I think the voters would have handled it a lot better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, because that is a common response that people have. Well, like, the U.S. also like collects our data, but the U.S. does not do so in a manner that the CCP does so. So I think it's important to make that clear, where we actually have a lot of transparency. Like if you look at Apple or Google, they have several pages and like policy blogs letting you know how they are using your data and what data is to be collected and where you can opt out. That's not an option that people get in China. So I think it's important to understand like the values and the metrics that we already have in place, because it's very clear that a lot of people are just simply unaware about it.
Yeah, and Adam and I were kind of discussing this the other day, and as someone myself who has done business in China, who has been to China, I know first, because there kind of seemed to be like this romanticization of China about how it's not all that bad, about how it's not, the U.S. does the same thing, and China's. How do you reconcile that China has billionaires and all this stuff? But as somebody who has firsthand experience there, I know the data manipulation that they do. I know how they block people, from being able to access certain pieces of data from the Western Hemisphere. So I 100% agree. I think it's dangerous. I think it's a national security issue. So that needs to be addressed. That needs to be handled. I don't know what I'm like you said. I'm glad I'm not in charge of this. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how to implement this or do this. But there's obviously an issue, and it's not something that you can just ignore and keep kicking the can down the line while this happens.
I think the idea that I put in our opener is, having the CIA come up with Freedom Talk would have been awesome, by the way. That's how we would have handled it in like the 50s and 60s, right? I mean, just come out and do it better than them and paid better and just keep it all on the lowdown that it was the CIA.
Yeah.
Well, while we transition a little bit into something that where you first came on my radar about was being so accurate on what's going on with the California fires. Because you live in the area, right?
Yeah, I am in West LA, and I am not from the West Coast. I originally grew up in New York, so dealing with this for the first time was just shocking. I've never dealt with wildfires before, so getting to understand it firsthand while just like looking outside my window, and then also just like doing the research that prompted me to do so, because I'm already highly aware of the California housing market. So my first thought seeing this was like, oh my God, you now have a lot of affluent refugees who are going to enter the housing market. That is terrifying.
Yeah. In your recent articles, you've talked about systematic failures in disaster prevention. What do you think our policies where do you feel our policies kept falling short?
Yeah, and I would first like to note that policy could not have mitigated the fire itself. To deny climate change and where California is located is just a nothing burger. It's just out of the way. So now that is being said, I think that previous restrictive, even NIMBY policies that we have in California has made us so much more vulnerable when it comes to rebuilding. And we are seeing that approach come out now. Gavin Newsom had the executive order where he is going to suspend CEQA, which is the environmental regulations bills that make it very long to get the permits to build here. And everyone was like, wow, great, amazing. Wait, why was this here in the first place? Also, wait, why is there a 10% cap on this? And that is just the same incremental approach that is getting us into this mess in the first place. And I think we are finally coming into a position where people are realizing, like, we understand that we want environmental safety regulations to stay afloat. We understand that we want to build safely, but we can't have this strangle us to the point where another wildfire, which is almost certain to come in the next coming years, will leave us even more vulnerable of the state. We need to understand that overhauling policies like this is the only way forward, and building densely in fire-safe areas away from the zones.
And one of the things that I like, I was endorsed, I'm not sure if you saw, I'm a town commissioner here, and I was endorsed by the Sierra Club. So obviously I'm very environmentally sound, and did, one of the policies that when I moved to state level that I've talked about is that we put environmental regulations and reviews on a time clock, and either we get it done by that time clock or it's automatically approved. And if we're just constantly failing, then we need to put and hire more people to do these environmental reviews. We can't allow environmental issues to be why we're not also providing abundance. Because dense building is how you also prevent deforestation. That's a big thing. I mean, you can see I'm wearing a Wake Forest hat, and our town logo is a tree. And one of the ways that you can prevent deforestation is building densely. You can stop deforming, building densely. But especially in LA, like, there's 12 million people just in LA. That's as much as all of North Carolina. Why would you not want to keep building densely? It was obviously working for you.
A lot of what NIMBYs say is like their number one argument here is that it ruins the character of neighborhoods. And that just blows my mind, because I'm like, putting shelter and having a place to live over the fact that you're not going to be so happy about how your neighborhood looks and you are worried about the type of people who are moving in. Like, we see this a lot in New York City when City of Yes was being proposed and they had the ongoing like hearings and everything, and NIMBYs had the same response over and over. It was Councilwoman Vicky in Queens who was saying, like, we don't want these people living here next to us, which is just insane as a Queens native to hear a city councilwoman say that, because Queens is literally one of the most diverse places on the planet, maybe. So the fact that you are not welcoming of more people to come and live safely and affordably in your city and town is just un-American, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you think about like so many of the global cities that are some of the most beautiful and attractive cities in the entire world that people flock to visit and see are densely populated with, I don't as somebody who lives in a single family home, I can't really say this, but I just love the beautiful old house that we moved into. But there's a proposition for a 100 unit townhome literally on the property directly behind mine. And I mean, the whole neighborhood's sitting here trying to fight it. And the only thing I'm trying to fight on this is just to make sure that it has the infrastructures to support it. And also, making sure it has sufficient entrance and exit, for fire safety and things like that. But I don't care if I hope they do. We need more housing in Charlotte, North Carolina. Most cities all over the world need it, honestly. And it baffles my mind. It's one of the most frustrating things is that people say, well, my neighborhood's not going to be as beautiful as it was. And you're like, okay, well, that's not really true. And it also doesn't come above providing affordable housing for people.
And having California have a historic parking lot that they were trying to preserve. I mean, it's just absurd, right? Like, there is no parking lot that is famous.
Yeah.
No.
We are way too car dependent in this city. I actually did not get my license or learn how to drive until I moved here. And I thought I was like, maybe I could be one of the few people who could get by. And then I just took a walk and I was like, oh, I'm on the side of a highway. Okay.
Yeah.
Can't be doing that.
Yeah,
but it's because like public infrastructure, like the trains here are just like not able to get you to where you would like to be, where it drops you off, where you have 20 minutes of walking in areas that are not that safe. And the fact that like public disorder on these same subways make it just difficult for anyone, average person, to use it to reliably commute to work. It's a shame.
Yeah, it really is. So in going back to the fires in particularly, so what role do you think climate change, and we've kind of already talked about urban development, but both of those sort of play in making these disasters worse and not being able to combat them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say climate change has a large part of it, but failure of forward-looking policy has made it all the worse to rebuild after this. One of my more recent pieces was that LA needs an Operation Warp Speed, and it was something, as I was doing research on it, Derek Thompson had a great segue into the beginning of his podcast that I will actually read for you, and it showed like this is exactly the issue that we have in America right now. So the 1871 Chicago fire led to the invention of the modern skyscraper, with new building techniques using brick, stone, and iron replacing more vulnerable construction methods. The devastating 1888 snowstorm that paralyzed New York and Boston's above-ground transit system inspired the creations of America's first subways. And most recently, the COVID-19 pandemic prompted unprecedented cooperation between government and industry to develop vaccines at record speed. We are amazing at dealing and reinventing and innovating through a crisis, but that should not be the baseline. And I think it's becoming more politically viable. And I think we saw that with Newsom and Mayor Bass suspending CEQA, where everyone was just like, if we suspend it now, maybe it should be there to begin with.
Right.
Should be using this as a time to look at LA past rebuilding this, because this is going to be the only wildfire that we ever have. And we can't keep just putting all these little band-aids on these major bullet holes and thinking it's going to solve something, because our infrastructure is clearly not equipped to deal with this. We are not equipped to deal with thousands of people now entering the housing market when we already have close to 900,000 units in underproduction. That is just a gap to fill underproduction, not even to close like housing shortage as a whole.
Yeah. So are there any specific policies or programs you think that could make a real difference in preventing and managing these fires?
I would say that overhauling CEQA would be one of the first ones to do and applying it statewide. Updating building codes, requiring fire resistant construction in vulnerable areas, and encouraging density in safer areas. It is okay to not want to have to live in a mansion in the Pacific Palisades in Malibu. I understand. People are probably always going to want to live there, and that's a different issue and one that will continue to play out, because I don't think we could be equipped to say stop building there at all if people want to take that risk. But we should make urban cities better to live in LA. We should build more so that people can feel safe enough to live here and not hate the area that they're living in.
So we have everybody's, kind of taken voters or Democrats to task in California on the wildfire. So we won't, keep sort of beating them down a little bit. But on the Democratic Party going forward, you wrote an article, I believe it was called Democrats 2025 Resolutions, Learning from a Historic Defeat. And in this article, you obviously go through some things that need to change. What should Dem priorities be moving forward as we start to approach, the midterms and then the next presidential election?
I think with how honestly terrible the outcome of this recent election was, is that we need to stop everything, become humble, and go back to the persuasion game. We cannot ride the high horse where Democrats are always winning the popular vote and everyone's always going to look at us as the good guys, because that is clearly not the case. We have been playing the anti-Trump card for years, and it's just not working. More people have voted for him than ever. So we need to shift gears and go back to basic competence and move away from rhetoric that is grand ideas that may or may not have some impact on you 10 to 5 years from now. You got to go back to kitchen table policies, look at what is actually impacting their cost of living. We all know cost of living was the number one issue that voters had with this recent election.
Yeah.
Work to fix that. A lot of that is housing. A lot of that is making sure the prices go low. Fix that first. Make it so that people can use the subway in New York City and not fear for their lives. And then go back to being the party of the grand ideas. But we really need to be humble first in order to get there.
So, and real quick, speaking on the economic aspect, because I think one of the first point in your article was listen to voters on the economy. And that's one thing that people have talked about that the Democrats did not do very well. They kept trying to convince people that no, the economy is actually good, despite your lived experiences. No, it's great. Here's the stock market and all that. Do you think it's a combination of messaging and policy, or is it just piss poor messaging?
I would definitely say it would be a combination of both, but I think messaging took the forefront here. I mean, if you look at consumer sentiment on the economy prior to Trump being elected, it was just poor. And the second he was elected, it shot up. So that goes to show messaging really does take the majority of that cake there. But there is some sound to that. Like Marie Gluckenkamp-Perez said a great quote that it's sticking with me throughout this. There's no spreadsheet in the world that can explain to people when they have to take groceries out of their cart because they can't afford it. So we can't continue to talk down to voters when they're telling you like, hey, it is really expensive to put food on the table. I understand that jobs are good, but I can't afford to do this anymore. When people have great jobs, they akin it to their own skill. When everything outside is expensive, they kind of blame the government there. It is just kind of like how the wiring of our minds work. So we have some disadvantage there. All the incumbents globally did not do well based on inflation. So that is also something to remember. But I also think within recent years, the Biden admin just completely failed at messaging.
Yeah, you made a good point there, because when your salary goes up, your natural tendency is to think, oh, well, it's something I did. I earned that. I deserved it. And when the grocery prices go up, oh, that's somebody else's fault. That's hard to message against, but you can't just ignore it.
I mean, we do have Trump tariffs coming in where we would most likely see an increase in groceries. So, like, I think it was Eric Levitz of Vox who said this. Like, a lot of inter-party fighting is probably most likely will collapse the second Trump goes into the office and just does what Trump does. Where it's like, oh wait, now we really remember why this guy was bad. I like to think like Trump works well in theory, not in practice for a lot of people. During his presidency, we weren't that happy with him.
Yeah, true.
So moving on a little bit on the same line, how do you think that the party can reconnect with working class voters who feel left behind, though?
I think it's a lot of shifting our communication gears. Ben Wilker is running for DNC, and I do like his approach and it's something I noted the second we lost the election, is that if you look at any top podcast charts, any of like the major news programs, they are all conservative media. And it's because we become so comfortable sticking in the bubbles that we feel safe.
Yeah.
And it's just an ongoing echo chamber. We have somehow begun to think that the average working person is a swing voter who might become Democrat, but we won't know because we're not speaking to them.
Right.
So I think it involves getting uncomfortable, going on Fox News, going on podcasts with people who disagree with you, not just to yell and push the same anti-Trump rhetoric, because we obviously know that's not working anymore, but focus on why Democrats are the party of the people, why they were the first ones to say that we need to clear out the swamp. So go back to that messaging. Obama was the first one to really hold and touch on that. And like, we really worked for us post 2004. It's clear people listen to that. They don't want to be with the party of the establishment anymore. We want to go against the status quo.
Yeah, and that's hard to do unless we make a significant shift. And Adam and I have talked about this, and it's not like the end of the world or anything, but seeing AOC being up for House oversight, not getting that to Jerry Connolly, 74 years old, is dealing with a cancer diagnosis. It's just like, why not give your party's best messenger, the person who is out there reaching voters where they are, why not give them an opportunity? But there's still, we like Ben here. We love Ben Wickler. We think he's awesome. I don't dislike Ken Martin. I think he would also be a good choice, but I'm really hoping for Ben. And this kind of ties back to the TikTok conversation a little bit, but younger voters are critical of the party's future. Are Democrats doing enough to engage them, or are we still just kind of too focused on elites?
I don't think we're doing enough to engage with younger voters. Kamala HQ, I think, was funny for 25 seconds, and then they really ran that bit into the ground there.
Ooh, we've talked about that a little bit here too. So we have some similar opinions there.
Yeah, and I appreciate the sentiment, but I feel like the majority of Democratic messaging is like, "How do you do, fellow kids?" Like,
100%.
Like the Democrats account right now on Twitter, if you look at it, well, everyone is just engaging in the ongoing conversation with TikTok. I think one of their most recent videos was them printing a snowflake shirt because Trump moved the inauguration indoors. And I'm like, we are in 2016 meme, like, what's that? Like, we got to move forward from there. And I don't know if that's like, I don't want to say failure of staffers, because I know it's a very difficult job to be a staffer, but there clearly needs to be a revamp there.
Yeah. It's just not cool, man. It's just not cool.
And not only that, but Trump's already talking about doing national, like starting in Chicago and New York, starting to go ahead and doing these immigration raids on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about that. We're talking about, how much of a wuss he is for moving everything inside because, like,
we still don't have an immigration message. We still don't have one.
We are definitely failing on that part. And I really do think like a key strategy that Dems should focus on for the next 4 years, treat Trump like the lame duck president that he is.
Yes.
Holding him up to some higher evil power that is going to ruin the world, because people don't want that anymore. They clearly voted for him.
They don't believe it.
They don't believe it.
Major issues like that immigration mentioned that there are very little reports there, and we have a week of EOs that are just going to come out. Obviously, there'll be room to make some jokes, and I will probably be on that front as well, but criticize where needed. Like, we saw the tax cut package that came out, where a section was called End the Cradle to Grave Dependence, and under that was SNAP reform cuts.
Right.
Remember, this is the party where they want to take food away from babies who can't afford it. Like, focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% it. Focus on, the real tangible things. Focus on immigration. Focus on them actually being the party of the elites, the ones that are putting billionaires in their cabinet and doing whatever they can to protect their interests, and just but you've got to have a message. You can't just say that that's bad, that's wrong. You've got to have the counter message, and we just don't have that right now.
It's the same thing with the banning of TikTok. Everyone's response to this on TikTok, who are in the Gen Z earlier millennial stages, is like, wow, the government hates us and they're just taking this away from us because they don't want us to mobilize.
Yeah.
That's something Taylor Lorenz actually wrote in one of her recent stories, is that they don't want progressive ideals to mobilize on there. And people are reading that and taking it as truth because we don't have many elected Dems stating the reasons why. Right. So you can't blame people when they're just being forced with all of this information, where it's like, oh my God, maybe they are doing this to remove progressive mobilization. That's insane.
Yeah. So TikTok aside, how do you see the government handling the growing influence of foreign-owned tech companies in the future?
I think, for example, the app of RedNote, I think that is a perfect app to show where Congress can have a very bipartisan movement going forward, just because within days we have immediately seen oh, what happens if you post about Tiananmen Square or anything else on there, and it immediately gets removed. And we also are seeing reports where they're hiring engineers to remove access from Chinese people seeing Americans post on there, and it's focusing on the very blatant censorship that is occurring there, highlighting that to the media, and understanding moving forward we should not allow the CCP to have any major influence in the U.S. at this level. Yeah.
Yeah, and what is the balance between national security and keeping the U.S. competitive in the tech space?
I would say it's investing domestically. The CHIPS Act was actually a great act where you are sending money to build out data centers, to focus on the new AI companies that are coming out and giving them the chance to flourish. I think sometimes we have a lot of new Dems who are kind of negatively impacting all these companies before we even allow them to see their full potential. So in order to remain competitive with China, we need to actually be competitive. And that is building up the tech and innovation that we have built up in the US. China is able to do so at this level and catch up at the way they are, because CCP has their full backing and is go crazy, go forth. But we're kind of sticking our foot in the middle where we're well, maybe we should regulate this before we actually find out what are the benefits or negative impacts that are coming out of that. And that is just not going to help us in the long run. We are seeing this with Europe. They're one of the only countries to have major legislations and regulations in regards to AI. And now they have fallen behind so much where they're oh, we have an actual major tech innovation problem here.
Yeah.
Did not do the right there.
Well, Tahra, your insights have been incredible. Before we let you go, where can our listeners follow your work and stay up to date with what you're doing?
Follow me on Twitter at Tahra Jirari. You can also follow the Chamber of Progress account at Progress Chamber. I'm on Medium too under the same name. It's TahraJirari. Thank you guys so much for having me. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, of course. And if you haven't or you don't already, please follow Tahra. She's got a lot going on, and you all need to hear much, much more of it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. We'll definitely have to have you back on Jackass Politics soon.
Thank you, guys. Great to
Thanks,
talk.
Tahra, so much.
Thank you. All right, switching gears to football, Ian. The playoffs are absolutely stacked today. We got the Rams and Eagles. Who do you like on that one?
Personally, I like the Eagles. I think their defense is strong, and defense, at home, cold weather. I'm going to take the Eagles on that one. Well-coached football team, not putting up the offensive numbers that they had in the past. Rams, I think, overachieved a little bit. I'm going Eagles. How about you?
Yeah, I think the Eagles' defense has been pretty consistent, but I think their secondary might struggle against the Rams' deep threats, and so I'm leaning Rams in a close one on this one.
Yeah, I think that one should be a good game. I think it should be. I don't think either one's going to blow the other one out. So, but that's going to be an interesting one for sure.
Then we have the Ravens versus the Bills going into a dogfight. The Ravens' run game is lethal, but the Bills' passing attack can torch any defense.
Yeah, this one's a tough one to call. Again, my tendency is to go towards the home team on this one. The Bills, the one thing I will say is Josh Allen's a good runner. That's not his first preference, but he's a very good running quarterback when he needs to. In these cold weather playoff situations, the run game tends to take over a little bit more. Both of them have massive big play ability. They can score in an instant if they need to. It's a little bit of a case of, and maybe less so with the Bills, but two teams that have historically a little bit underachieved in the playoffs, not really lived up to their regular season ability. So we're going to kind of see which one is ready to take that next step. The Bills have done it more recently than the Ravens, so I'm taking the home team again. I'm taking the Bills.
Yeah, I could see it where if the Bills score early and often, that they could force the Ravens to abandon the run game, which that is key for me to make them one-dimensional.
Yeah, I 100% agree. If there's two aspects to the Ravens' run game. One of them is a product of the pass, drop back and pass, nothing's open, Lamar takes off, and then there's the very designed aspect of what they do in the run. But if you can take away their ability to run the ball, or like you said, score quickly, and then have a spy on the quarterback in passing situations, you could make life difficult.
Yeah. So what did you think about that? Just explosive game between the Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions last night.
I was waiting for this to kind of happen with the Lions, with the number of injuries they've had on the defensive side of the ball. To me, they punched above their weight for a large part of the season. Despite these injuries, they're a very, very well-coached team, maybe the most well-coached team in the league right now. But unfortunately, they just had too much to deal with. Jaden Daniels, Heisman winner, rookie quarterback for Washington, cannot be understated what he's doing in this moment, what he's, not something you see people do all the time. He's given them a new level, a new dynamic, and the kid is just a playmaker. I watched him torch Florida at LSU, and he's just very, very capable player, athletic, great arm strength, great accuracy. He deserves a lot of credit there.
I'll be surprised. I'll tell you, I was really surprised with Jaden Daniels coming out of college. I thought it was more his receivers because, he's had quite the receiving core come through.
Yes, for sure.
I really gave it more to them than him. But I got to say, the Commanders in the offseason got Adam Peters as their GM. I was really hoping the Panthers got him because he just appears to know. He helped San Francisco get their team whipped into shape, and he was vital to what was going on in San Francisco. Now he appears to have already had a massive impact in Washington. Yeah. Do you think the Panthers missed out on hiring him, by the way?
I wouldn't really say missed out. The Panthers were in a very unique situation in terms of all the dead money that we had, the roster being depleted in many spots, just bad prior management, and I think the things that we have done between Brant Tillis and Dan Morgan have been very, very good. The Panthers are going from maybe the most dead cap of all time to basically none, not this offseason, but next, which is a good step. They've made some good moves. I think they're headed in the right direction. So I'm not prepared to say it was a mistake. That. With GM, that's something that takes time to develop. It takes time to really see the product of your labor. So No, I wouldn't say yet that they've missed, but it's kind of a wait and see right now. I think both teams have done well.
Yeah. So what I was getting at before I asked that was, Jaden Daniels has really surprised me because I did not expect a rookie to come out and play like that. I mean, he really put the team on his shoulders and just really helped them steamroll it last night. I think that's pretty amazing, and I'm looking forward to what the kid can do in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing that you can say about him is sometimes rookies come into the league and for like the first several games, they just blow up because nobody has tape on them. They don't know what to expect. They do really well. Jaden Daniels got better throughout the season. So the more defenses were able to adjust to him, the more he made his own adjust, and the coaches as well. And, if he gets to the, they're in the NFC Championship game, but say the Eagles do end up winning, they get to the NFC Championship game, and that's a divisional tie there. They split in the regular season. The first game, Jaden Daniels didn't play all that great. They didn't score many points. Second game, Washington won. They scored a lot of points. That one ended up in like 36-33 or something like that. So that would be an interesting test for him. Can he do it in the biggest moment on the biggest stage?
Yeah. And then the final game that we had yesterday was Kansas City and this went blank. Who'd they play?
Houston.
Houston, that's right.
Yeah.
What did you think of that game?
So I was out. My wife and my daughter and I were out, and it was on TV there, but there wasn't volume, so I didn't really have any announcer bias or anything that was in there. But the thing that people are talking about, obviously, is some of these calls that Patrick Mahomes was the beneficiary of, and when I was watching, I was like, yeah, these are bad. Like they're showing replays, and I'm not getting the explanation for why this was called. But and there was one moment, and I don't think it ended up being called, but you could kind of see the what was happening. Patrick Mahomes goes out of bounds. His 2 feet are still in bounds. He gets touched like this, and then he flops and throws his hands up and falls down. And I'm like, what sport is this? Like, is this Neymar at Barcelona or something like that, where he's just flopping around on the field like a fool? I don't want him to get hurt. I don't want him to get injured, but it's getting to the point where if you're a defensive player and they're just going to call this anyway, take your shot, man. Like actually just hit him real good one time and let it happen. And we saw some of that with Tom Brady back when he was the darling of the NFL. He's got rules made around him. He got well protected. Come on, bud. He got very well protected, as a quarterback in the pocket, can't hit below the knees. He's the reason that is a rule now. So it's hard to watch, and it's frustrating as a defensive player because you don't know what you're supposed to do. And I think it needs to be evaluated, and I think it needs to be looked at by the head offices why Patrick Mahomes gets this treatment and others don't seem to.
Yeah. And I don't know if I agree fully that Patrick gets it. Nobody, I mean, it's been an ongoing thing all year about how the Chiefs do get calls that nobody else does.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the Taylor Swift effect, or, they want the Swifties that, I don't want to say the NFL is scripted or anything. I don't believe that, but do they get maybe a little bit more favorability? I don't know.
I think the NFL has a vested interest in dynasties because that creates a lot of storylines and a lot of intrigue.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's not scripted. No, I don't think that. I don't think that's the case at all. They're not going out there and they have plays to run and all that, and the NFL calls it in from up top. I think referees are people. They can be influenced by Andy Reid. They can be influenced by Patrick Mahomes, 3-time Super Bowl winner, 3-time Super Bowl MVP. I think they just I think they want a dynasty because it creates a lot of storylines. Who's going to knock the dynasty off? Can the dynasty continue? Is Patrick Mahomes the greatest quarterback of all time in the making? Like, there's all these conversations that can be had. Whereas if you have a new NFL team winning the Super Bowl year in and year out, you know, your storylines are a little less predictable.
Sure. I did think it's kind of funny as a final say on that. I guess I shared with you in a group chat a while back about there was like an advertisement from the NFL during the 80s. And like basically every hit that they showed, illegal now. Football is a completely different sport from the 80s.
Way different. And most of it is for good. Like, you know, I don't want these people ending their lives over this or not being able to walk when they're 50 years old because of, you know, worse CTE, brain injuries, things like that. But yeah, sometimes it goes a little too far, but you know, if it keeps these people protected and it keeps them, then so be it. At the end of the day, it's just a game.
Right. So let's switch over to college football. Tomorrow we got Ohio State and Notre Dame in the college championship.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State's offense is a buzzsaw, but Notre Dame's defense has been the great equalizer all season. So that's one all about style clashes, right?
Yeah, Ohio State, when they're on, they score early and they score often. If Notre Dame cannot control the pace, they're toast. I think I've made it clear. This one I'm all Buckeyes on. I think they just have too much for Notre Dame to deal with.
I do think Notre Dame has a shot if they can force turnovers, but yeah, Ohio State is just too much offensively. And also, if I didn't pick Ohio State, my wife might divorce me. So,
yeah. I mean, I think, luckily, I think you're pretty safe. Look, crazier stuff has happened. It's college football. At the end of the day, these are kids playing games. This is not, you know, NFL veterans who have been in the league for 10 years. You know, you've got Will Howard on Ohio State, who is a transfer. He is a redshirt senior. Same with Riley Leonard on the other side with Notre Dame. You know, these are two extremely experienced quarterbacks. One of them, Will Howard, being a little more capable, but he's also surrounded by 2 first-round picks at wide receiver. He probably has 2 other wide receivers on the roster who are going to be NFL players, maybe second-day draft picks. Ohio State's defense has good playmakers on it. They are a little bit vulnerable. You can score on them. It's not like they're just, you know, a lockdown sort of defense that we've seen in the past. Notre Dame has a little bit more of that. Their front seven is very good. Their defensive backs are very disciplined, even if not, you know, the best in the country. I just think. And, you know, I say this with a little bit of hesitation because we saw what happened with Ohio State and Michigan, where Ohio State's offense just shut off out of nowhere. It was just like it didn't exist anymore. And that can happen with Ryan Day coached teams. So is that going to happen tomorrow? It's possible. I don't think so. They're so confident. They're riding every high. They know what they're capable of. This is a rivalry game in a sense, but it's not Ohio State, Michigan. So I'm taking Ohio State for sure.
Awesome. Well, let's keep shifting gears here. So, all right, folks, let's get into our Jackass of the Week. This week, it's Jefferson Griffin, the Republican candidate for the North Carolina Supreme Court, who's trying to throw out over 60,000 votes. Let me say that again. 60 fucking thousand. That's not democracy. It's straight up fucking theft.
And these aren't just any votes. Griffin's targeting ballots from Democratic strongholds like Wake County. It's calculated, it's malicious, and it is an attack on democracy itself.
And he's even expanded into attacking overseas voters, military members, expats, people serving the country on working abroad. And he's essentially saying, your vote doesn't count because it doesn't help me. That's despicable.
Griffin's whole strategy is like playing Monopoly, but ripping up the rule book halfway through and declaring yourself the winner. It's childish, it's desperate, and it's fucking dangerous.
And what makes this even worse is the North Carolina Supreme Court is enabling this bullshit. They blocked the certification of the election so that Griffin can argue his case. And let's just not forget, Justice Allison Riggs, who is his opponent, the Democrat who actually beat Griffin has to recuse herself. The court's Republican majority is running the show now.
This isn't just about Griffin. It's the playbook for voter suppression. Undermine confidence in the system, throw out as many Democratic votes as possible, and call it election integrity. It's cynical, cowardly, and dangerous.
So, Griffin, congratulations. You're not just this week's jackass. You're a fucking warning sign. If voters in North Carolina don't fight back, this becomes the new normal. And democracy as we know it is done.
Griffin, wear your shame proudly. You've earned every damn ounce of it.
This week's jackass, if you can't tell, I'm a little pissed off about it.
Yeah.
You and I are both here in North Carolina. This is just straight up bullshit. This is Banana Republic stuff, and it shouldn't even have a chance to have its day in court.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It is an attack on democracy. It is an attack on election integrity. Half of me wonders, and I'm not going to beat this dead horse like a lot of people have for the last 4 years, but, January 5 years now, January 6th, did that ultimately kind of trickle down to this point where, this seems like the playbook at every level for the Republicans to attack democracy. And, we've had multiple targeted recounts in this race, and the only fucking thing that happened was Allison Riggs got more votes. And he's just taking it further and further and further, looking for that one way that he can illegally overturn this fucking election. It's just, this needs to be a national story. This needs more attention. We saw, or I was listening to a podcast with Ben Wickler talking to John Favreau on Pod Save America, and he brought attention to it, saying this is what we're fighting against at the state level across the country. This is why he wants to build, democratic strongholds, disaster response in a political way in all the states across the country. So when shit like this happens, we can bring it to light, we can fight it, because this isn't just a North Carolina thing. If this works, this is a playbook for getting this done everywhere.
I mean, that's what they've been using North Carolina as for years now. Ever since the Republicans took over, we've kind of been their little lab to be able to see, they throw all this shit at the wall and see what sticks. And I'm frankly fucking tired of it, man. And it's dangerous, and it needs to go. And I would be saying the same damn things if this was Democrats doing it. This has no place in our democracy. It's not democratic. I mean, 2 of the votes that they're contesting are Allison Riggs' own fucking parents.
It's ridiculous. And we've seen story after story on social media of people coming out. There's even a database where you can now go look, sign in, and see, is your vote affected here? And there are people who are literally just citizens of North Carolina who went to the polls and voted, brought their voter ID, did everything that they should, and their vote might not count. I mean, what justification could you possibly have for that? And of course, now Mr. Griffin has taken to deleting some of his social media so that he doesn't have to face the fucking public blowback. I mean, he's just a coward. Where is he, too? Where is he? We had a half Facebook post from right after the election or something, but where is he? What's he doing?
I mean, being a public servant means that you gotta take the heat, and he's definitely not. He's not up to task for this, and just bitching out on being able to take the heat just tells me everything I need to know about the guy. Let alone, I mean, a Supreme Court justice candidate is doing this. I mean, that's the highest, be the least political office in our state, and they're just making it blatantly partisan.
It's ridiculous.
I hate it.
Yeah.
So that's a wrap for Jackass Politics. Huge thanks to Tahra Jirari for joining us and breaking down the TikTok mess, the California fires, and the Democratic Party's future.
And if you like what you heard, please help us out. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this with your friends. It makes a huge difference for us. We like the discourse. We like to engage our listeners. So please, if you have a question or correction, a comment, give it to us, and let's get the conversation started.
Or even a guest. We've only had Democrats or left-leaning people on so far. We want to have some right-leaning people, some sane ones. Please send them to us. And And just remember, folks, Main Street over Wall Street, always. We'll catch you next time on Jackass Politics. See you.
Later.